This is the DIY Garden Minute by Spoken Garden, teaching you tips and tricks for your garden in minutes. Find more quick topics at spokengarden.com and click on the Listen tab. Today, I want to talk to you about some highlights from this past gardening year. This year in our garden, we planted and grew new plants along with converting new areas of the garden into more useful spaces. We moved some plants around and others we didn't move enough. Along with it being a really dry and hot summer, we did some traveling to Michigan and to Minnesota, where neither of us had ever traveled before, and this was all for gardening, of course, and we kept making podcast episodes and YouTube videos, and started going live on Instagram in the beginning part of this year, and then restarted our YouTube lives later on this year. Then you pack in all the political and economic issues happening in the country, and it really has been quite a year. So here are a few specific highlights from this past year from our garden. First off, we had Leggy Hydrangea stems. This past year was our first full year growing a number of new hydrangeas, including Firelight Tidbit, Fairy Trail Bride, Let's Dance Can Do, and Quickfire Fab, all which are a part of ProvenWinners ColorChoice Shrubs. All these hydrangeas did great in our garden, and we had lots of healthy growth. We did notice by the end of the summer that some had started to really stretch for the shifting sun at that much more southern angle than earlier in the beginning of the summer. So we now know that in our garden, our temporary garden that is, these hydrangeas need to be moved to more light in the middle of the summer and further on so they can get more sun. This also was from us being 2 hours away from our garden and not being able to monitor it close enough. It definitely made things interesting. Next up, we got to grow Rex begonias, and if you've ever grown them, they're a lot of fun to grow. They're so unique. We were sent 4 new Rex begonias from Ball Horticulture this past spring and had the chance to grow and trial them in our garden. Wow, this was such a fun experience for us because these are usually only indoor plants in our growing zone. We planted them outside in a nice shaded area with some beacons and patience and just some dusty miller, and they all did really well. We had fully grown, filled-in containers in about 2 to 3 weeks after planting, and all the plants fit well together for water and their sun needs. Heck, they are all still growing well together even right now at the end of this year, and we had a lot of multiple below freezing days and nights. Since they are set up next to a garage, we figure they must be getting the needed residual heat during the really cold days and nights to continue to grow right now. Now, next up this year, we started perennial verbena and English lavender from seeds. We'd never done that before. So this past January, we started seeds that needed a specific cold treatment, the perennial verbena and English lavender, and they needed this cold treatment for 2 to 4 weeks before they could trigger their germination process. We didn't see any germination from these seeds while we grew them in our little mini greenhouse outside, which was, again, 2 hours away. But once we brought them home, we placed them into our garage refrigerator, and we started seeing germination in about 3 or so weeks. Until trying to grow these perennials from these seeds, we never really needed to place sown seeds in a refrigerator, so it was a fun experience, and starting seeds is always a good time anyway, right? Now, the last thing we want to tell you about from this past year is we actually pruned our new hydrangeas that I just told you about. Now, of course, we can't go through a year without pruning something, and all of our hydrangeas, new and old, needed a good shaping earlier this spring and fall. We even made a couple of videos this past year on how and when to prune your macrophylla hydrangeas, your serratas, your paniculatas, and even a couple hybrids. It was a really fun learning experience for us to prune on all these new hydrangeas this year and see how they responded to our light and hard pruning depending on the hydrangea. Now, we've made videos for each of these highlights that I mentioned here and a lot of other tasks and topics in our garden this past year, so make sure to head to our YouTube channel and see how we did all of this and more. Links to each of these specific videos mentioned in this podcast will be in this episode's description. And I want to take this time for both Allison and I to thank you for all the time you've spent listening to our podcasts. Please email us with any new podcast topics that you would like us to cover, and be sure to reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. A very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and your family. Thank you for listening. You can find other quick tip garden topics on our podcast page at spokengarden.com and click on the Listen tab at the top of the page. And make sure to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already so you don't miss future quick garden episodes. We'll see you in the garden.